Pegasus Malware, developed by the NSO Group, is a hacking malware that can break into iOS and Android phones. This technology allows authorities to break into smartphones remotely, making everything in them visible. All emails, contacts, and texts, new, old, encrypted or not. Pegasus allows detectives and agents to track locations, listen into, and record conversations. Even if an individual can escape the malware on their personal phone, investigators can create a web of contacts. For example, former drug kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's phone was not directly targeted. However, the information provided by this software led to his arrest in January of 2016. While arresting and apprehending international drug lords is the intention of the Pegasus malware, targeting journalists critical of authoritarian governments was not. The NSO Group CEO Shalev Halio has stated that the malware was sold to prevent crime and terror, and the malware was not used in the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Yet, current legal litigations and a report by Citizens Lab prove that many believe that this software is not being used as intended. A report from Citizen Lab based in Toronto at the Munk School of Global Affairs has proven that these statements in the CBS interview are not correct. The report proved that Saudi Arabia used the Pegasus malware technology on political dissidents. According to the CIA, Khashoggi was murdered on orders of Mohammed bin Salman. His location was revealed to Saudi authorities using the Pegasus malware. Furthermore, it is crucial to state that the abuses of this malware discovered by Citizen Lab were by no means confined to Saudi Arabian IPs. Citizen Lab was able to find 25 cases of abuse in Mexico where Pegasus was used to target political rivals, reporters, and civil rights lawyers. The intent of this software to be used solely to protect society from terrorist threats and drug traffickers is not how governments are choosing to use this malware. The theoretical debate about this malware, though, from a utilitarian perspective, is not so clear-cut. A utilitarian's view on Pegasus software is difficult to ascertain with certainty. The father of utilitarianism, Jeremy Bentham, would find confliction with the Pegasus malware. Utilitarian's moral hedonism places the ultimate standard of value on pleasure over pain. You can only judge an action right or wrong if you can properly judge the quantity of pleasure or pain it represents. Pegasus software, in many ways, contributes to Bentham's greatest happiness principle. Violating the privacy of criminals or violating the privacy of law-abiding citizens are both justified if they lead to an overall increase in happiness for the greatest number of people. There are many who believe Bentham's underlying moral theory is applied direct act utilitarianism. Any rule and principle can be ignored if it maximizes utility. However, Bentham wanted to show that the connection between moral judgment and utilitarianism as a decision strategy was complex and not simple as contemporary act utilitarianism suggests. Bentham is far more nuanced and complicated than most academics comprehend. On the subject of surveillance, however, the inventor of the panopticon believed that surveillance was not only good for individuals long term, but good for society as well, if it was used at an institutional level. Unfortunately, his theoretical prison design became the theoretical model that would inspire entire societies in the 20th century, such as fascist Spain, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union. Utilitarianism in application tends to lead towards authoritarianism, poverty, and utopian plans of social control. By caring only about the sum of the greatest happiness, utilitarianism can ignore the disadvantaged individuals who are not counted in the equation. Written in the 1840s and 50s, public philosophy of utilitarianism combined with free markets and limited government in application left the majority of the population in misery, not the greatest good. To that end, if utilitarianism is solely concerned with calculated gains, it can turn a blind eye to that of the suffering of the minority, and in some cases, the suffering of the majority. At first glance, utilitarianism appears to have no issue with the malware. However, John Stuart Mill would disagree with the malware because of the clear abuses perpetuated by governments such as Mexico and Saudi Arabia. John Stuart Mill tried to save utilitarianism by recasting it as a more humane and less calculating doctrine. He believed that one could balance individual well-being and the greatest good. by subjecting innocent citizens to surveillance to maximize utility might contribute to the greater good today. However, Mills would say that the silencing of dissenting opinions, as was in the case with Mexico, will make society worse off in the long run. The worst thing society could do is to conform to this new reality without a discussion about character and human dignity. I agree that utilitarianism is flawed because first, it makes justice and rights a matter of calculation, not principle. Second, by turning to translate all human goods into a single uniform measure of value, it flattens them and takes no account of the qualitative differences among them. Even though Mills tried to save utilitarianism's view of justice, and Bentham's moral theory was not based on direct act utilitarianism, one can find conflicting arguments of justice for the Pegasus malware from both. Utilitarianism in some instances would believe that the greatest good is achieved when governments use this malware as intended. But because governments have not used the malware in a just way, other utilitarians would be horrified. One cannot find a consistent utilitarian theory of justice when applied to the Pegasus malware, outside of direct act utilitarianism. Other ideologies that are internally contested can guide just action more coherently than utilitarianism. Libertarian ideology offers a reasonable argument largely against this software. Initially, a libertarian would both be conflicted and terrified by this software. On one hand, it is a great tool for the protection of the night watchman state. In a night watchman state, government is a limited protector and exists solely to guard the citizens from threat, foreign invasion, coercion, and internal violence. Yet this malware has gone beyond targeting terrorists and criminals, and a libertarian would say that a state surveilling an innocent individual is now morally unjust and is the exact kind of big government that should be avoided. Big government overreach and extortion of property are common libertarian talking points. But data collection and surveillance spyware already exists in the West without the implementation of this malware. There is an often overlooked reality when individuals in the West think about data collection and surveillance. Data is the crude oil of the 21st century, and its ability to accumulate capital for companies and advertisers is ceaseless. Far from a traditional libertarian thinker, former presidential candidate Andrew Yang promised that he would break up the big tech companies and make data a property right if he became president. There is not much difference between monetary theft and personal data theft. Both are the theft of an individual's property. On the issue of surveillance, we already live in the surveilled world that Orwell warned us about, with or without the Pegasus malware in the West. If we want to seek justice for unethical surveillance, what privacy exactly is there left to protect? With the advent of smartphones, smart televisions, and games components like Xbox Kinect, with which manufacturers and advertisers can gain visual and oral access to the room in which they are placed, many people in Europe and the US today live in worlds dominated by Orwell's telescreens. If we are continuously generating surplus value by being surveilled, then why don't we have a right to sell that data? Of course, we consent to this data collection by purchasing products that have spyware, but that doesn't change the fact that the data generated has immense value. Nor does it change the fact that private industry is just as guilty of mass surveillance as corrupt liberal governments. If we criticize spyware, then we need to criticize it with logical consistency. Both private and government actors are culpable of guilt. Legislation like Bill C-59 in Canada, for example, not only enables mass surveillance, but will encourage and legitimize the international market for spyware and hacking tools, which will inevitably end up in the hands of abusive state actors, criminal organizations, and other malicious actors, despite being marketed toward intelligence agencies. The repressive technology that the citizens of Oceania endured is no longer just fiction. In George Orwell's 1984, technological progress only happens when its products can in some way be used for the diminution of human liberty. Through the security of the war on terror, privacy, freedom, data collection, and exploitation are justified political realities. Concurrently, the private sector has created a governmentality of surveillance that is both increasingly seeking data for capital accumulation and is increasingly replacing state government scope and capabilities. In conclusion, governments who have purchased the malware are not using it to target terrorists and criminals, but human rights activists, journalists, and innocent people who are not connected to criminals. I have shown that utilitarianism does not offer such an easy explanation for justice in this situation. Bentham, a strong advocate for surveillance, and Mills, a believer in individual liberty, would not easily find agreement. In its ideal form, utilitarianism would condone the malware because the utilitarian designed the security apparatuses of Nazi Germany, fascist Spain, and the Soviet Union would seek to reinforce the repressive state apparatuses. Libertarianism instead offers a more coherent and valid approach to justice. With the libertarian view, its approach to justice would not only condemn the Pegasus malware, but also the rampant data collection and surveillance in Western civilization committed by both private and governmental bodies. If one is an ideologically consistent libertarian, they would not only condemn the Pegasus malware, but take steps to curb unethical surveillance from the private sector and security agencies in the West. We need to criticize Pegasus malware and the privacy abuses committed by corrupt governments, as well as by the unethical neoliberal private companies. Libertarianism is the best approach to justice in the modern surveilled world.